Welcome back to another episode of the Colts Brawl podcast. I am your co-host, Cody Felger. Alongside me, Michael Terrazas. Michael, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right, man. Got the sniffles today. I was just outside. I don't know about that pollen count right now, but hey, we're feeling good.
Yeah, for sure. It's a nice day out. The sun is shining from the window I'm looking out of right now. Definitely a beautiful day, but kind of on that a little bit. Kind of some crazy stuff has happened since we last recorded this week in the NFL around the coronavirus. The NFL and some of the teams have kind of suspended some things because they don't want to risk, potential some employees getting sick and everything like that. Obviously some universities and all this stuff has shut down. The NCAA tournament, basketball tournament is no longer a thing this year. And so all this crazy stuff is happening around the coronavirus. And actually, this is something that we were just talking about off air, Michael, is we expected this to happen, but the Colts just officially announced it as they continue to monitor. This is a statement from the Colts as they continue to monitor developments related to the coronavirus. They've implemented some precautionary procedures to ensure the welfare of all their employees. So that basically means that Colts headquarters is going to be limited to, they say, essential personnel only. And so the travel for coaches and scouts is going to be suspended until further notice. And they say the health and safety in the community and the organization remains our top priority. And so obviously some other teams have already done this. Man, this is a bigger deal than I think we thought it was going to be. It's just kind of crazy how this week a lot of things have just started to shut down. What do you think this means, man, for the NFL going forward? Some pro days, all that kind of stuff as the free agency is approaching here this next week, and then obviously the NFL draft at the end of April. Man, what is this coronavirus right now doing? How is it impacting the NFL in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different avenues?
Well, I mean, the good part about it is that the season is over. That's the good part about it. We're about to start the new league year. The NFL came out and said the new league year will stay March 18th. So that's a positive. And what it means for the season, it's just like the waiting game right now, man. For the season in general, training camp doesn't start until July. So that's a good thing. We got time to see if players need to get vaccinated, if they have a vaccination. I don't know. I'm not in those meetings or in that room with team officials, but I would imagine sometime by June or May, hell, maybe even next month in April, we'll find something out going forward. As for the draft, I definitely think that it will still be televised. Players will still be there. Select family members will still be there. But I wouldn't be surprised if, no fans were allowed. Sure. That's just got, it's some of the biggest days of these players' lives, but it could also be dangerous. And the smart thing, precautionary, you got to think about the fans. You got to think about, because people travel all over the country to go to the draft. I mean, the draft is, I guess you could say it's not the Super Bowl, but people still come out and want to celebrate their new players. As for the scouting and everything, look, I mean, Chris Ballard and company, everyone in the NFL, they've done so much studying already, and they're still going to do so much studying. They've gone to practices, they've gone to scrimmages, they've gone to games, they've gone to the Senior Bowl, the NFL Combine, and as for the pro days, they'll still get film of the pro days because the pro days are, I guess you could say, they will still happen. I know some of them will still happen, and they're going to be filmed. And that film will be distributed to all 32 teams, and they'll still be able to, do that. The pro day isn't like a make or break type of thing, but you think about some of the players who held out of the NFL Combine, the Senior Bowl, and said, you know what, I'll just do this at my pro day. That, that could cost someone, not like someone's job, but the difference between a second round pick and a fifth round pick. Because I guess that stuff, matters that much to those players. So as for the NFL, man, it's smart. It's the smart thing. These scouts, they're not just scouts, man. They're their husbands, their wives, their moms, their dads, their brothers and sisters. They have families to go back to, and that's the smart thing to do. The last 2 days, the sports world has been turned upside down, and it really didn't hit me until the Rudy Gobert stuff came out and all this stuff just started. I don't remember, I'm only 21 years old. I don't have too much time on this earth so far, but hopefully I have a lot left. I haven't seen anything like this. I remember Ebola. I remember all that stuff. I don't remember sporting events getting shut down. Some schools canceling. And right now, I'm kind of a WWE fan. I've kind of faded out a little bit because I'm just so busy now. But hell, they even updated that tonight's show, Friday Night SmackDown. They're not even going to have it at their original venue. They're going to go to a venue that has like 2,000 people. They're not even going to be in an 18,000 arena anymore for right now. And that's just, those are just the precautions in the sports world because you're dealing with so much medical stuff. Everybody has some kind of medication they're taking. Everybody sweats, they come in contact. And that's the biggest thing right now, man. And I just want to encourage everybody, if you don't already, have a good hygiene, wash your hands, hot water, stuff like that. I'm just praying for everybody that has tested positive. I know there are some people, right now in my town, someone's getting tested right now. There was a report that came out about it later last night. So, I just, pray for everyone all over the world, not just in Texas. This is just so much bigger than sports. It's going to be different because there's not going to be any sports at all. But hopefully we can find an answer to this. Hopefully we can calm this down because right now, man, it's crazy. Went to the store yesterday and everybody's buying water for some reason. People are buying toilet paper and there's there's no sanitizer anywhere. Like I went to HEB, it's gone. Bath and Body Works, it's gone. Bath and Body Works online, it's gone. Walmart, it's gone. Stuff like that. So I actually deep cleaned my parents' house yesterday. And they're coming back from vacation. So, just precautions like that, man. Everybody just stay safe out there, just pray about it. I would encourage anyone to pray. And that's really all I have on that.
Yeah, it's wild, man, because yesterday some of my friends and I, so we're risking it kind of, and we're going down. We've had this plan for months and months. We're going down actually to Florida. We're leaving tomorrow morning early, so like 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. So we were getting some stuff for going down there and everything. And we went to the toilet paper section and it's completely just gone. Like there's nothing there. Absolutely wild. And it's just crazy, man, the madness of some people. And they actually had a sign that said 2 per household because people were just taking all the toilet paper. And so it's just crazy, man. It's something that, I'm only a couple years older than you, but it's something where it's crazy. It's something that we've never experienced before. And it's just wild to see kind of the mania of it and just everything shutting down, all this stuff. You never have heard of that before. Mm-mm. It's just wild to think about that stuff. But it was actually on my other podcast that I do, was on with brought on some guys from the Heavyweights podcast. It's like a football podcast. And they were talking about, some of the effects that this would have on the league. And one thing that I think, man, if this coronavirus continues to linger and things are shut down, you think of even free agents that sign other places. If the Colts were anticipating the Colts sign a few more free agents than they did last year, and they only signed 2. So you think those guys you want to get them into the offensive and defensive systems. You want to get them, up to date and all that stuff. But man, if you can't travel anywhere, if you can't do anything, and even with your rookies, you can't really get them into the building. If this thing continues to linger, into, OTAs and all of that stuff. Who knows how long this is going to linger, but if it does, man, that could have a tremendous impact. And it could kind of be similar. One of the guys, Nick, he kind of compared it to the lockout a few years ago, where it's like, man, none of the guys are in the building. It's kind of just like a crazy thing where you don't have a full NFL offseason. And it just would be kind of crazy to think about that. If that does, happen, if it continues to linger, if they don't kind of get it under control by then, by the spring, how that will impact everything. It's just kind of crazy to even think about that. But yeah, man, like you said, hopefully everybody who, is keeping very, very clean. Hopefully everybody's taking care of themselves and washing their hands and sanitizing their hands and all of that stuff, because it's just madness. And we're just praying, man, that people don't contract it, don't get the coronavirus. And if they do, they get the right treatment so they can get back to being healthy. And it's just crazy, man. There's been a couple cases where, some places have had a person, they've had to quarantine them in Indiana. And I know that I actually heard this story yesterday. There is a lady who, is a guy that I was talking to. He goes to their church, or she goes to their church, and she's like a nurse. And so she was like checking a guy in who had a confirmed coronavirus. And she is in quarantine for 2 weeks, and she didn't even really touch the guy, but she was just near him enough that they put her in quarantine. That's how serious they're taking the situation. And so hopefully everybody, man, who's listening can really just take the right precautions in that way. But yeah, that's kind of our take on the coronavirus, that can impact the NFL. I mentioned free agency, Michael, and I mentioned that it's coming up this next week on Wednesday, the 18th, and then obviously illegal tampering starts on Monday. So it's really like free agency is starting on Monday. And so I thought that we could kind of look today at some of the unrestricted, restricted, and then exclusive rights free agents that the Colts have. So these are guys that the Colts could potentially bring back. The Colts have talked about one individual that for sure they'll probably bring back. They're working on an extension with him. We'll get to him first. And then they've also kind of shut the door on a few different players as well. So I thought we could start first with unrestricted free agents. And the guy I was just talking about, left tackle Anthony Costanzo. He's a guy that's been a rock for the Colts ever since he was drafted in 2019. He's played 9 seasons now in the NFL. He was one of the top graded players at his position last year in the NFL. He's fantastic he's always been really, really good and an elite run blocker, but I think he's in the last couple of years even gotten better at that and pass protecting. And so he's one of the best left tackles in football. Pro Bowl alternate last year. He actually told reporters after the season that he was potentially contemplating retirement. But he came out a couple weeks ago and told Chris Ballard, I want to come back for another year, and we're going to take it year by year. And so obviously Costanzo, huge thing. And the Colts, Ballard was said in his presser, we're working on a contract extension. So it looks like both parties there, unless something crazy happens. The Costanzo will be back in a Colts uniform in 2020 and hopefully for the next few years. So that's a guy, man, that's obviously a huge domino, like we've talked about within free agency, within the draft, because if Costanzo retires and he hangs it up, man, now you're scrambling, because arguably left tackle is one of the most important positions in football. And especially, protecting, if the Colts do go after, one of their quarterback there at 13 or, in the first couple rounds, you're banking on that guy. You're putting a lot of investment in a guy at quarterback that you think can lead your franchise going forward. And you got to get him the proper protection. And unfortunately, man, as Colts fans, we saw the wrong way to build around your franchise quarterback. And so obviously the signing of Costanzo is huge. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to, Anthony Costanzo coming back and what that means for the Colts going forward?
It's big time, man. It's big time. Anthony Costanzo, he probably, and you mentioned it, he probably just had his best year of pass blocking in his career.
Yeah.
I mean, he's always been a good run blocker. And this year you just saw it. Despite Jacoby Brissett's struggles, just look at what Anthony Costanzo did not allow. And look at the pass rushers that the Colts went up against this season. I mean, you're looking at Von Miller. You're looking at Bradley Chubb, Cameron Jordan, Shaquille Barrett. You're looking, I can't think of all of them right now, but he went up against a whole bunch. And man, he's just a big time player, man. He's a veteran presence, and Chris Ballard talked about how important those are and how he didn't get enough of them. And, for Anthony Costanzo to be the voice of the offensive line, Quentin Nelson, he is the best player on the offensive line, but Anthony Costanzo is the leader of that unit. He is the leader of that unit. And to keep him there, to have continuity, it's just big time, man, that it shows up, in the weight room, on the practice field, in games, it just shows up. And I don't have too much to say because you hit on most of it. Anthony Costanzo coming back is big, and it eases the need for left tackle. You still might want to get one, and now you don't have to potentially spend a first rounder on one or throw $30 million at one.
Right. And you mentioned continuity, Michael. I think that is a huge, huge word, and a word that the Colts, a couple years ago, if you said continuity among the offensive line, we would have signed up for that because there was no continuity among that offensive line for a long time. Really since Andrew Luck was drafted, and even before that, there was a lot of guys rotating in and out of the lineup. You never had – I would have to take time, and it'd probably take me like 10 minutes to write out, maybe even longer, write out the list of offensive line combinations that Andrew Luck had to play with in his career with the Colts. It's absolutely nuts. It's like, you look at that. Have you ever seen that, that thing with the Cleveland Browns with their quarterback situation where they have all of these different names at the quarterback position? They keep writing more and more names. That's what it felt like with the Colts offensive line. Like, you just keep adding names of guys that didn't work out. But Costanzo is one guy that has worked out. He's been about the only consistent guy through Andrew Luck's career when he was with the Colts from 2012, obviously now to 2019. He was the most consistent guy. He was always, protecting Andrew Luck's blind side, and he always did a really fantastic job. So obviously a huge domino coming back for sure. I kind of want to talk about some other of the offensive linemen since we're looking at that. And I kind of just want to talk about these three guys because I kind of look at them in the same kind of light, kind of reserve guys that didn't really see the field a lot, guys that you could maybe let walk or maybe re-sign, kind of be indifferent about them. But they're just really guys for depth purposes. If one of your guys gets nicked up, they can step in there. The first guy is Josh Andrews, the center. He was the backup center for Ryan Kelly all year. I remember Kelly got banged up in that Pittsburgh game week 9, and Andrews came in there, and I thought he played pretty decent, all things considered. Yeah, he played 49 offensive snaps that game, so I thought he was decent, a decent guy there. I wouldn't be opposed to bringing him back. He's not spectacular, but he's not like a liability either. So I wouldn't mind bringing Andrews back. Another guy. Speaking of liability, LaRaven Clark, a guy who was drafted actually the same year as Ryan Kelly, and then the next guy we'll get to, 2016. He was a third-round pick. He has the ideal size, the ideal arm length, all that stuff to be a good offensive tackle in the league, but he's just, he really hasn't put it together in the couple of years, I guess the 3 years that he's played for the Colts. Obviously, when Costanzo went down in 2018, he filled in for the first couple games, and I thought he was okay. I didn't think he was anything special. But, all things considered, I think from the investment that you put into Clark in the third round, he hasn't really panned out. So I probably wouldn't bring him back. But, if you do, it's probably just as a depth piece, and you still want to obviously upgrade that tackle position. And then the last guy I want to look at, obviously, is Joe Haig. He's a guy that's kind of the Swiss Army knife of that offensive line. He's a guy that can fill in. He's really played every position except for center, and he probably could play center if you wanted him to. He's a guy that's played, when Costanzo went down, he played left tackle, he's played right tackle, he's played left guard, he's played right guard. He's just the player that does it all for you. He's played in 4 seasons, like you said, now, and he's was a 5th-round pick in that 2016 draft as well. He's a guy I think, Michael, if I had to choose out of all 3 of these guys, he's probably a guy that will probably command the most money, but he's a guy that I would want the most because it's rare to find guys, and this is something that I know Chris Ballard and really all NFL GMs really value, is guys that are really versatile and guys that can move along, offensive line and defensive line. Those guys are really invaluable. And so I would bring Haig back if I had the choice. But I'm curious, out of these three guys, kind of who would you want to see coming back to the Colts potentially in 2019, and who would you kind of let walk?
Well, first I would let walk LaRaven Clark because the Colts have kind of done everything to help him. And it just hasn't panned out. Like you said, he's got the size. He's got the ideal arm length that scouts look for in a left tackle. And, man, it just hasn't panned out. Some of that quickness, he kind of lacks a little bit. Having strong feet under him kind of lacks a little bit. And it's just, we need to put someone there that can get the job done. So I would let LaRaven Clark walk. Josh Andrews, look, man, good offensive linemen, especially if they're backing you up, are hard to find. They just are. And, I mean, hell, we had practice squad guys starting on our offensive line for 5 years. And look how that panned out. So Josh Andrews, like you said, he played in that Pittsburgh game, and he actually held his own. And remember, Pittsburgh has a pretty good front seven. And Josh Andrews did pretty well against Javon Hargrave. He did good against these guys, picking up blitzes from Devin Bush and calling out at the line of scrimmage. That was a real good showing, and I think someone, especially if you're playing the center position like he does, you got to have a good backup center. That is literally the quarterback of the offensive line. You have to have a good backup. So Josh Andrews, I wouldn't say is a must, but bringing him back, I would welcome it. And then Joe Haig. He could start in the NFL. He can start in the NFL. He has the talent. Like you said, he knows all 4 positions. Hell, he probably knows all 5 positions. They just haven't asked him to play it because Ryan Kelly and Josh Andrews. I would like to see him back. But, a guy like that who does produce a little bit, who does know all the positions on the line, I would probably guess that someone would throw more money at him than the Colts, because you know how Chris Ballard is with his money. I would have to think that, I want Joe Haig back, but I think Josh Andrews is easier to bring back than Joe Haig. Maybe I'm missing something, but I just feel like when it comes to that money, someone who needs an offensive line, whether if it's right tackle, left tackle, they're going to offer the money.
Yeah. That is my biggest concern. What is Haig going to demand? Does he think he can go somewhere else and start and make starter money, or is he content being that, kind of 6th offensive lineman, Swiss Army knife type player for the Colts? Because, they believed in him. They drafted him in 2016 in the 5th round. And he's just been really, really good for them as that backup, kind of player that can play all positions. And so I think it's very valuable. I think if I was the Colts, I would offer him probably a little bit more than most people would, just because, like you said, it's hard to find good backup centers. It's also hard to find guys that can play every position and actually play them well. And so, it's just something where I hope Joe Haig kind of takes a hometown discount a little bit, but we'll see. And I would love to have him back. I think he's just one of those players that you love to have on your team. And so it would be fantastic if the Colts did bring him back, but if they don't, totally understandable, because he's probably going to be commanding a decent amount of money. So, okay, so moving on now to a guy that, the Colts have pretty much said, and Chris Ballard has pretty much closed the door on, and that's Eric Ebron, tight end, played in 11 games this last year. He had 31 catches, 375 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was placed on injured reserve November 25th. He had some ankle injuries reportedly, but it sounded like kind of from Ballard's presser when talking about Ebron that it might have been more than just an injury. It might have been more of a, kind of mindset and more of a, did Eric Ebron kind of quit on the Colts? And that's a debate that people have been having for a while now. But Chris Ballard has pretty much said we'll probably move on from him. But, that impacts your tight end position because Eric Ebron was your receiving threat, your red zone threat. at the tight end position. And so you're going to probably have to address that in a draft. But what does losing Eric Ebron do for the Colts, and where do you think they should move forward, Michael?
Well, I think, they'll miss the big playability because Eric Ebron, I mean, say what you want about Eric Ebron. He has big play potential. I mean, he was a top 10 draft pick for a reason. And, I remember these last 2 years, Detroit Lions fans coming at us saying like, oh, just wait, it's coming. Oh, just wait. I don't know how much of a great locker room presence he was. I know he was, a good personality, charismatic guy, funny guy. So I don't know too much of what he will leaving will mean for the Colts because, I mean, it's like the old cliche, everyone's replaceable. And
Right.
with Eric Ebron, I mean, you remember his big catch against Houston. That's some stuff that you want to find. And you can find it, man. I don't think losing him is going to be too big. He wasn't that big of a difference maker, especially when you come in front of the media and say, get me the ball, and end up dropping 7 passes the following game. That
Right.
just doesn't work out too well, especially for me. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I watched that game and I'm just sitting there just saying, come on, they're getting you the ball. It's balls in your court. Literally, it was in his court and he didn't catch it. So, I'm not too big on calling out a player, but I feel like he somewhat lacked accountability. From a fan's point of view, who's not in the locker room, who's not in the, film room, the weight room, not on the practice field. That's just from my point of view. If someone listening wants to correct me on this, I would accept it gladly. But, I just don't know too much of him accepting accountability. The drops have lingered. I mean, I remember the opening drive in the divisional round against Kansas City on a 3rd and 2. It was a simple 3-yard pass, luck through to him, and he dropped it. It would have been a first down. That was an important drive in Kansas City, and he dropped it. So losing him, I mean, this is what I like about Chris Ballard. He just doesn't play any nonsense. He's going to come out and tell you what he thinks, tell you what he feels. And, with Jacoby Brissett, he likes Jacoby Brissett. He wants to see more. And then with Eric Ebron, all it took was 4 words. That's it. Not another word about him. Yeah. I mean, I remember watching that press conference, and I believe it was Stephen Holder who asked the question, and literally just sitting there staring him right in the face. We'll probably move on. Like, I was just like, oh, dude, Chris Ballard, in the most professional way possible, Chris Ballard just said F Eric Ebron. I mean, that was just like, dude, Eric Ebron pissed off Frank Reich and Chris Ballard because, in my opinion, we don't know what's going on in people's body, but it does seem like he quit on the Colts and looked forward to cashing in a big paycheck in free agency. I believe it was Eric Ebron who came out and gave a timeline of what was going on with the injury. He was having injury problems in training camp. And, as the season went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. So you sit there and you're just like, wow, I felt like he kind of ran away from the problem, Cody. And I'm going to explain why. I feel like he made up an excuse for his production. I get you have ankle pain, and I don't know how much the severity of that pain, but your ankles don't stop you from catching the ball, especially when they hit you right in the hands. And I don't remember him coming out saying, I need to play better. I need to catch the ball. I need to be accountable and stay an hour after on the jugs machine with JB getting better. I don't remember that. And I felt like he kind of ran away from that scrutiny. He put the spotlight on him and he didn't deliver. And then he quit. It just rubbed all of us the wrong way. And I I wouldn't re-sign him. He's not coming back. So that's where we're at with him.
Yeah, it really. I was never a fan of Eric Ebron as a person. Like, he's a good player. I thought he was good when Andrew Luck was here, obviously, but I was always very wary of Eric Ebron because he has that high profile personality. And I think, I always kind of viewed him. A lot of fans loved him, obviously, after 2018 because of the production and all that stuff. But I was kind of I saw him on Twitter and I saw how he could not handle any criticism at all. It was really obvious. It was just anybody would call him out, he'd have to respond. Anybody would say anything negative, he couldn't handle it respectfully. And then look at a guy like Pierre Desir, for example. He's a guy that is so level-headed, and so he had a fantastic season in 2018, and then 2019 not such a great season for different reasons. But he's a guy that's going to continue to work and continue to be better and want to be better. And he's just a guy, man, that I just see the complete contrast in those two players. And I wasn't surprised at all when Eric Ebron did what he did, honestly, because he's a guy, man, that's not going to take accountability for what he does, and that is so contrary to what Ballard and Reich have been preaching about accountability, holding each other accountable, holding your teammates accountable. And Eric Ebron, for some reason, can't handle that. I feel like he thinks that, just because somebody, Twitter and social media are toxic places. Let's not pretend they're not. But, taking some of that criticism and not lashing out, but taking that and actually looking and evaluating, okay, where can I get better at? I didn't like to hear that, but, maybe there's some validity to that. And I think that's something that Eric Ebron, hopefully in his next place he signs with, man, he thinks about it more, and he thinks, oh, man, maybe some people were right. If there's a lot of people saying something, you're always going to have critics no matter who you are. But I feel like if there's a lot of people saying that, well, maybe there's some truth to that, and maybe you should look into that instead of getting all defensive and trying to basically say, I don't have a problem, I'm a great player. Maybe there's some things you can improve on, but it just always rubbed me the wrong way. I was never an Eric Ebron guy. I saw some people getting Ebron's jerseys and stuff after last year, and I was like, that is not a good investment in my opinion. I'd much rather get a Darius Leonard, Quentin Nelson, one of those guys, jerseys, because they're the guys that stand for the right things that the Colts are looking for. So definitely don't see Eric Ebron coming back to Indianapolis at all, because I just think he's counter to what the Colts are trying to build here.
Yeah.
But it was a good season in 2018 for Ebron, but man, I think the true, when we truly saw Eric Ebron's colors were when things weren't going well. When the Colts were on that losing streak, if you think about some of those players, even in this last season when it was rough, even you look at Rocky Ya-Sin, for example, Colts rookie last year, second round pick, he struggled a lot in his rookie year in certain moments, but he was consistently wanting to get better, and he did eventually get better. And he took some of that criticism, and he kept working to get better and hone in his craft and get to be the best player that he could be. And that's the type of player that the Colts want. They want a hard worker, a guy that can take criticism well, and can continue to, want to improve and continue to, go back, like you said, and back into the weight room, back into whatever, the jugs machine. And that's just what he's got to be, man. That's just the kind of player that the Colts need to look for now, and when they look for their next tight end, just less of a me first player. What can I do? How can I benefit? And more of a, if he gets good stats, great. But if I don't get good stats, that's okay too, as long as the team is winning. And I think that's what the Colts need to get. But that's just my take on Eric Ebron. I haven't really shared my opinion on Ebron a lot because I feel like there are still some people who defend him. And so I don't really want for people to get super upset about my take on Eric Ebron. But that's kind of how I've always felt about Ebron. No hard feelings. I'm moving on from him. It is what it is. Thanks for 2 years. But
I just want to say a couple of things on Ebron. Look, I mean, I hope he gets paid. He definitely has the talent. I hope him nothing but the best. He has 2 boys, and I think he's a great father. But like you said with this social media stuff, I mean, dude, I guess you can call us analysts, bootleg analysts. I don't know, but I mean, we cover sport. You know how many times people come at us on social media. I mean, I had a YouTube video where I previewed TCU and Ohio State, and nothing but Ohio State fans were calling me delusional, calling me racist things because, I mean, I don't know why. Look how that game ended up being. Ohio State was scared for their life. But it's just like, why do you have to respond to that? Like,
you don't. Right.
Come on now. I mean, when I was 17, I was responding to everything. I was cussing everybody out.
Yeah.
But right now, man, I mean, right now it's just like it's not worth it, dude. I mean, like what am I getting out of it? I'm just making myself look like an ass. It's just not worth it. And look at Andrew Luck, man. Could you imagine if he had a Twitter account when he retired? Oh my. It's like, and exactly with Andrew Luck, when he knows the offensive line wasn't doing well, the receivers weren't doing well, the defense was doing well, he came out, I need to score points. I need to set this offense up. I need to do better. That's the one thing about Andrew Luck I miss the most. I don't care about the fantastic plays he made. I don't care about the, aw shucks on the offensive line. I miss the coming up in front of the media. Hey, I need to be better. I need to be better. Don't go and attack those guys. We will get it together. I need to get this together. I need to play better. That's that leadership quality that is so hard to find, especially in your quarterback. That's just one of the things I miss. And we can go ahead and move on from Eric Ebron about that. But that's just a couple of things I wanted to say.
Sure. Yeah. I appreciate that. Okay. So we can stay kind of at the skill positions. And now I'll move over to the wide receivers. There's a couple guys that I kind of want to clump together here. Three guys here that are set to be potential free agents. And that is, first off, Devin Funchess, a guy who only played in one game last year, only caught 3 catches for 32 yards. He tried to come back, couldn't come back. And so we never really saw Funchess, but he's a big body receiver. He's definitely over 6. He's like 6'3", 6'4", big wide receiver, big body, signed a 1-year deal with the Colts. And so it remains to be seen if the Colts intend to bring him back or not. Another guy, Dontrell Inman, he was a guy that was a key cog to that offense later on in the 2018 season when he really solidified in that and nailed down that number 2 wide receiver position alongside T.Y. Hilton. But, he came back for the final 3 games, didn't really make much of an impact, and he's getting up there in age. And then Chester Rogers, who's been with the Colts for a while. It feels like a long time. He played 12 games. He started 6 games. Went on IR. He got a knee injury. He didn't really do a whole lot for the Colts. He's always been a player that people have projected to potentially break out, but he's never really lived up to that potential and that hype that people have given him. Out of all these guys, Michael, who would you bring back? Which wide receiver would you be most interested in bringing back? And maybe there's multiple guys, but who are the guys that you would also probably want to move on from?
Okay, so real quick, the first name literally just escaped me. It's Chester Rogers, Dontrell Inman, and then who?
Devin Funchess.
Okay, Devin Funchess. Devin Funchess. I think I don't think he's coming back. I would like for him to come back just based on we didn't get to see anything. He made some big catches in LA. And you saw that potential. That's why we got him. That's that. I don't think he's coming back, to be honest. But with Dontrell Inman, I wouldn't bring him back. Like you said, he's getting up there in age. We don't know what more he has to offer. It seems everybody's play decreased when Andrew Luck left, and that's expected. I mean, Chester Rogers had probably the best season of his career last year in 2018. And then Dontrell Inman resurrected his career in 2018. But now it's just like, what do we do? Chester Rogers, 2 years, he's been predicted to be a breakout player for the Colts. It hasn't happened. I would let him walk. And Dontrell Inman, I would let walk. Devin Funchess, I have mixed feelings about him, man. I think I'm just ready to move on and get new guys in the draft. I'm open to a veteran in free agency, but as of this moment right now, I'm kind of out, on all 3.
That's fair. Yeah, and I think that's something that the Colts are definitely going to need to address. And we've talked about it on this podcast. They got to upgrade that wide receiver position. You got to find or at least try and invest to try to find your number 2 receivers alongside T.Y. Hilton. Because the Colts have tried and tried and tried and still have not found that number 2 wide receiver. And so I think you have to do that. You got to bring in, you got to maybe potentially sign a guy in free agency. I'm thinking Amari Cooper if the Cowboys are silly enough to let him walk, or even drafting a couple guys in the draft. You just got to address that. And I don't think you need to bring back any of these guys. If I had to choose one though, I'd probably bring back Funchess, just because you don't really know what you got, and you kind of look at the Colts wide receiver core as it stands right now, and they don't really have a big body like Funchess offers you. And if you bring him back on a similar deal, another 1-year deal, and if he doesn't produce for you, you're not really tied to him in the future. And so if I had to choose one, I'd probably choose him. But I'm totally fine if the Colts don't re-sign any of them. It's totally fine. I mean, like you said, Chester Rogers, he's been a guy that's been predicted to break out. But even with Andrew Luck, he hasn't been a breakout star. And so, you just kind of saw it even more with Jacoby Brissett. Like, he's just not a guy that's going to, I think he's a guy he's okay for you. He's like solid, but he's never going to be a guy that's going to, ultimately make you go, wow, on tape. He's just pretty average in all areas. And so I'd probably let him walk as well. Especially, that was another thing with, I believe it was punt returns. He was doing punt returns. And then when he got injured, Nyheim Hines started doing punt returns. And obviously he had that huge game against Carolina. And so, I think that's the reason why the Colts kept him on the roster for so long, is because he offered you value in the receiving game and also in the punt return game. And so I would probably be fine if the Colts just let him hit free agency as well. And then obviously Dontrell Inman I already talked about. But yeah, that's kind of my predictions for that. Okay, and the next guy on a list, also on the offense, skill positions, running back Jonathan Williams. And he was a guy that 2018, he was on the Colts practice squad. Actually, he's on their active roster, I believe, but he didn't really see any playing time for obvious reasons. Marlon Mack, Jordan Wilkins, and Nyheim Hines saw the field, and so we didn't really see Williams really much at all in 2018. 2019, on the other hand, he actually started one game and played in 9 games. He had 49 rushing attempts for 235 yards. He had a touchdown. And the big thing for Williams was when Marlon Mack went down there in weeks 11 and 12, rushing performances and played really well, all things considered. And so, overall, man, he's a player that I'm just kind of like not sure how I feel about. I mean, if you can bring him back at a good price, I definitely would, because of the wear and tear of a 16-game season and potentially, more games, depending on what all happens there. But, with the wear and tear of an NFL season, you're inevitably going to have at least one of your running backs, if not multiple, get injured throughout the year, get nicked up, whatever it is, because it's just a long season. And so I like, from a depth standpoint, I would bring back Williams and kind of have him in that same role, because if Marlon Mack goes down again, man, Nyheim Hines more of a, I guess, receiving running back than anything. He can run it, but like I would probably start Jordan Wilkins over him and say Jordan Wilkins as a whole is probably a better overall running back, but Nyheim Hines can do so much for you. But if you bring back Williams as well, you can, he's shown that he can do it when given the chance. And so, you just bring him back for depth purposes. I totally would bring him back if I had the chance. If he's not, based off of those couple games, if an NFL team's not like, hey, we'll pay you a ton of money to come play for us. If that's not the case, I would totally be okay if the Colts bring back Williams. What are your thoughts on bringing back Jonathan Williams for the Colts?
Jonathan Williams, man, that's tricky, because Chris Ballard loves Jonathan Williams. He loves himself some Jonathan Williams.
Yeah, he does.
Him. And we saw why. He had a pretty big game against Jacksonville, rushing over 100 yards when Marlon Mack went out. You saw it against Houston, even though Houston was stuffing the run all the time. He ran like 40 times in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a serviceable body. And I think if, if you're able to hold on to him, like you said, I think the Colts need a bigger running back. I've said that on this podcast. I like those bigger running backs that will wear down a defense in the fourth quarter. I would probably re-sign Jonathan Williams and then trade Jordan Wilkins, Cody, being honest. Yeah, because Marlon Mack, that's your guy. Then you got Jonathan Williams. That's the backup. He'll come in, give you some good ones. And then Nyheim Hines, he's your gadget player.
Right.
I mean, he can still run the football. That quickness is just unbelievable. But you see what he offers you coming out of the backfield, lining up in the slot. And for the God life of me, I don't understand why he was not punt returning in the first place.
I know, you and me both. It was frustrating. It was like, what? Why did we have Chester Rogers back there? He doesn't do that.
Even in training camp, I'm sitting there. I'm like, are we not going to try Nyheim Hines or Paris Campbell?
Yeah,
they're faster than Chester Rogers.
I think the concern, and I think in the Colts defense here, this is the only reason why I would see them not doing that. You saw that in the preseason of his rookie year. Nyheim Hines could not return. He couldn't field punts, and he couldn't
hold on to the ball either.
Right. And maybe they kind of got cold feet with Paris Campbell as well as do we want to ask a rookie to do that again and potentially hurt his confidence going into his first year? So I get that, but hopefully now with Chester Rogers moving on, the Colts will have one of those guys back there doing that. And I think Nyheim Hines has definitely got to do it. And then Zach Pascal obviously returning kicks. So, absolutely. Okay, so we can move over now to the defensive side here. Not really as big of names on the defensive side. There's a few guys that Colts fans would know of, but nobody that I say is an absolute re-sign like Costanzo would be. The first guy, Clayton Geathers, he was a defensive captain in 2019. He actually got benched for Khari Willis, and he only started for 10 games. He had 48 tackles. He actually had his first career interception, which I think was interesting, on one of the worst passes I've ever seen from Matt Ryan. And he played a lot of special teams for the Colts. And this is an interesting one for me, Michael, because you heard Chris Ballard's press conference talking about how he felt like there wasn't enough accountability and enough veteran leadership. Well, Clayton Geathers gives you veteran leadership. So do you bring him in, because you see that and he's done it and he's a guy that can also play special teams for you. If one of the players was to go down, Khari Willis was to go down for a game, Clayton Geathers can play that role still. But he's, with the wear and tear of his body and through his career, he's not playing as many snaps as he was playing earlier in his career. And so, I think the question for me is, how much does Ballard value leadership in terms of the kind of player he is, in that way and how he's viewed in the locker room versus the actual talent on the field? For me personally, I probably wouldn't bring him back because I feel like with the injuries and all that stuff that's happened, I feel like his play has declined in the years. That's just kind of what I have seen. It just doesn't seem like he's as solid as he was before, but I don't know. I'm kind of torn on Geathers. If they bring him back, I would assume it'd be like a 1-year deal again, prove it type of deal, just for some leadership in that back end, a very young secondary back there. But I think depending on what they do with Geathers, it kind of will influence. The Colts have been reported to be interested in Eric Berry. So I think it'd be interesting to see if they don't bring back Geathers, if they would still try to find a veteran leader like Berry back there. But what would you do with Geathers if you had the option here?
Man, Cody, we think alike, man. I'm the same way with Clayton Geathers. Mm-hmm. I love Clayton Geathers. He is one of the very last few standing from the Grigson meltdown. And he's been there for the Colts, man. I know he's suffered these injuries, but you can't deny the heart that he plays with. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's about production. Khari Willis took his job because he offers more, not only in the run game, but in the pass game as well. In that first meeting with Tennessee, Khari Willis was a difference maker in that game. he stopped
Yeah.
like 3 first downs that were like
Yep.
on 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2. I think it was 4th and 1. I think it was one of them. And I mean, Kari Willis was just all over the field. So if I'm being honest, man, you can love a player, but business decision, you got to let Clayton Gathers walk. If, let him test the market. If there's nothing out there, negotiate. I wouldn't mind Clayton Gathers back. It's not impossible to have 5 safeties, but I definitely think you have to bring in another viable safety. Bring Clayton Gathers, bring him back in a linebacker type role. Because if these linebackers are getting skinnier, well, Clayton Gathers is like a Popeye's biscuit away from a linebacker. That's just it. That dude is strong. And
yeah.
That's just the way I see it. That's also been talked about. Clayton Gathers going to linebacker, and I think if you're, I think now is the time to make that move. If Clayton Gathers is going to come back, I want it to be in a linebacker role.
Right, a role where ideally he's not trying to cover some of those really fast guys, because that's always been kind of his Achilles heel. Is he's been big hitter type of player, but I think if he had an Achilles heel, it would probably be his coverage. And so, if he was covering a guy, it probably would be more tight end type players. And so I would agree there. I think if you bring him back, you still probably should address that safety position and maybe just move him around and try to just find different places for him to thrive. And who knows, man, maybe he could find a revitalization in a different position. But yeah, I think you let him test the market. If there's nothing there and he wants to come back and feel like he can play at a high level, you bring him back for another year, because depth is not a bad thing. And especially if he's taken a, veterans minimum type of deal, I think that's totally fair. So yeah, I agree with you there. Here's another guy that I think would be, I think a guy you need to re-sign. But I understand if you don't, you probably need to address it in free agency or the draft pretty early. And that's Jabal Sheard. He's a guy that he's been really durable for the Colts, except for last year when he was injured for the first couple weeks. Remember, he got injured in training camp, and so he actually missed the first 3 games of the season. But he had really, you think of Jabal Sheard, he had very Jabal Sheard type of numbers, really good against the run, not an elite edge guy in terms of rushing the passer. He only had 4.5 sacks. But he's just been the guy that's been a consistent player on that Colts defense. And, I would argue to say he's been probably one of the better players that Chris Ballard has brought in on that defensive side ever since 2017 when he was the GM, when he started becoming the GM for the Colts. And so for Sheard, man, I'd bring, he's getting older, he's getting up there in age, but he's a guy that I've always liked a lot. I think, especially with some of your young pass rushers in Ben Banogu and Kamoko Toure, they're not really guys, at least at this point in their young careers, they're not really good run defenders. And I think that's an underrated trait of Jabal Sheard. I think he's just a guy that provides leadership. He's not necessarily a guy that's going to, not a vocal type leader, but he's just a guy that's going to go in there and he's just going to do his job. And I think you need some of those players as well. So I would definitely, re-sign Sheard to, not a multi-year deal, but maybe a couple years. Because I still think he's got a lot left in the tank for the Colts, and he's just been really good ever since he was signed by the Colts in 2017 in free agency. And so, what would you do with Sheard? What is your thought on him?
Well, I believe we said this in a previous podcast before, and I'm going to say it again. I'll bring back Jabal Sheard, but I won't bring him back in a starting role. That's just. You need guys who can consistently rush the passer, and Jabal Sheard does not consistently rush the passer. No doubt what he offers in the run game. Bring him in run situations, on first down, 3rd and short, goal line situations, stuff like that. Bring him in that way. But, man, I really feel like from a pass rushing standpoint, which remember what this scheme is, pass rushing means everything. Jabal Sheard holds them back a little bit in that department. You got Danico Autry, they can think about it like this. If you're an offensive coordinator, you're looking at the front 4, Justin Houston, Danico Autry, Grover Stewart, Jabal Sheard. Okay. we're going to primary focus on Jabal Sheard. Okay. We're going to double team, or we're going to leave our left tackle, our best left tackle on Jabal Sheard, double team Danico Autry, and then the rest can go take Grover Stewart and Jabal Sheard. When your best players are getting double teamed, you got to have guys who can beat out those one-on-ones and get to the quarterback. And 4.5 sacks, I just don't know if that's good enough on play-to-play downs. When I watched games, especially in passing situations, Tampa Bay, Houston, those games come to mind. And I sit there and I'm just like, where was Jabal Sheard at? You got to bring someone in who can consistently rush the passer. I would like to see Jabal Sheard back, but not in the starting role.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think he's a guy. Yeah, you get to stop the run, but then in passing situations, third down and long or whatever it is, you bring in guys. You bring in a guy that can rush the passer, and who knows, maybe you give more of a run with some of those young guys, Kamoko Toure, who I think is the Colts' best pass rusher right now, and then also Ben Banogu, who I thought had some flashes in his rookie year. So, okay, cool. Well, I think that does it for those. For the offense and defense. Now we can move on to the kicker, Adam Vinatieri, a guy who has been the Colts kicker ever since I've watched. So he signed with the Colts the year of their Super Bowl run, their Super Bowl victory, was a key part of that. Remember that Baltimore game? He kicked 5 field goals. He was a big reason why the Colts advanced to the AFC Championship game against the Patriots. He's been a guy that's, he's the GOAT in terms of kickers go. He's the all-time points leader in NFL history. He's a guy that's just done it, and he's also nicknamed Mr. Clutch for all the clutch kicks he's made in his career. He's just a guy that, has been fantastic in the league. He's first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt. But man, this was undoubtedly the worst season of his career. He's still dealing with that groin injury. I think he suffered it even last year, and in 2018 with that groin injury. He continued to linger throughout training camp and still is continuing to linger. He 17 to 25 on field goal attempts. But that's not the worst part of it. The worst part is he missed 6 extra points. I mean, he was only 78% on extra points made. And so he was placed on injured reserve. And then obviously the Colts brought in Chase McLaughlin, and he played very well. He was a rookie. He was a guy that was kind of floating around the league. I thought he played really well as a rookie, but the Colts re-signed him. I think it's a no-brainer for me. I love Adam Vinatieri. It's kind of similar to Clayton Geathers. Obviously, Adam Vinatieri has accomplished a lot more in his career than Clayton Geathers has, but I think it's something where the Colts can't afford to get sentimental here. I mean, this is a business after all, and the Colts need to make a good business decision and not bring back Vinatieri. I think Vinatieri has talked about rehabbing this offseason and kind of seeing where he's at. I just am of the belief, man, that Adam Vinatieri cost you way too many games last year. And I know it's a team game. I know there's other factors, but he hurt the team in tremendous ways. And I just think you got a young kicker in Chase McLaughlin. You want to bring in some other competition, you can. But I'm ready to move on from Vinatieri. He's 40, over 40 now, 45, I believe. And when you get older, man, like when these injuries happen, they linger a lot longer than if you're 20, 30 years old. And so I'm kind of the belief that you let Vinatieri, if he wants to keep kicking, you let him test the market and see if anybody wants to take a shot at him. But if I'm the Colts, man, I'm making a business decision here, and I'm probably not re-signing him. But what would you do?
Like I said, we agree a lot, man. I'm not bringing back Adam Vinatieri. You called him Mr. Clutch. Wasn't Mr. Clutch in 2019. You got to live up to the name, man. And at some point in time, Father Time catches up to you. And like you said, with these injuries, he's dealt with this injury for the last 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And your body just doesn't heal as quickly or as successfully as it once did. And the flexibility you need in that hip, that leg, quad, hamstring to accurately kick a ball, that's important. And at this point, I gave him the leash in the season, I'm not going to give him the leash in free agency. I'm just not. Like you said, I was kind of, I guess you could say, what's the word I'm looking for? It's escaping me.
Was it sentimental?
No, not sentimental. Where you're trying to not believe what's true.
Oh, kind of, is the word you're looking for like delusional?
Not delusional.
It's a better word for delusional. It doesn't sound so bad. Nostalgic, maybe. I'm trying to think.
Like you're trying to believe, like you're trying to believe that the situation is better than it really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, regardless of the word, I get what you mean.
Yeah. Viewers at home that are smarter than me, y'all know what I'm talking about. But you gotta look at it as a whole body of work, man. You gotta look at it, and he did nothing. To be honest, I feel like Chase McLaughlin took his job, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Because he came in. What's the difference between Lucas Oil Stadium when Adam Vinatieri kicked and Chase McLaughlin kicked? He didn't cost you games. I mean, remember that Tampa Bay game? He kept them in the game. He was not missing extra points. I think he missed like a 55-yarder though, right?
Right, but he also made some from 50-plus yards as well. So it's and he's young. He was a rookie last year, which is crazy. I thought he was multi-year, but
he kept the Colts in the game. And I'm just like, yeah, dude, I'm done with Adam Vinatieri. I was so frustrated with him. Like, I couldn't even watch him kick anymore. Every field goal, every extra point, I just turned away and just waited for the crowd's reaction. It's just hook left, hook right, bounce off the upright, too short. I mean, it's one thing after another, and you got to correct the problem. That's one of the things that rarely I got onto Chris Ballard about, because he's sitting there and saying, well, we got to correct this. No, you got to get someone in there that can get you points. That's the whole point of a kicker. If this was high school, if this was college, you got me. But this is the professional football league. There's got to be someone out there that can kick better than him. And then he came out and said in season, well, when I look at the guys that we brought in versus Adam Vinatieri, I'll take Adam Vinatieri. Well, guess what? Chase McLaughlin was an undrafted free agent, and he performed better than Adam Vinatieri. So I will take Chase McLaughlin over Adam Vinatieri. Like you get sentimental.
Yeah, you can't. And I look at Chase McLaughlin. He missed one field goal with the Colts, but perfect on extra points. He made all, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I think he was 12 for 13,
11
right?
of 11. He was 11 of 11 for extra points, which is key. He made 2 from 50 yards, 50-plus yards. 50, yeah, wow, that's crazy. He missed one in the first game, the Tampa Bay game. I believe that was a long field goal that he missed. But other than that, his record was spotless with the Colts. I mean, he did exactly what he was called in to do. He made field goals when he was supposed to. He attempted 6 field goals, and he was 5 of 6. And the one he missed was from 55 yards. So, yeah, he's a rookie also. So he's a guy, man, that he can kick it from 50-plus yards. And he's a guy that makes extra points, and he's young. It just makes so much sense. And I think it's telling, though, of what the Colts did with him. They re-signed him, which I think is big. They re-signed him to a 1-year deal, so it'd be interesting to see. They liked what they saw. So, I would be interested to see for sure. And I hope the Colts make the right decision here, and I hope they make the smart decision. And I hope they don't go back on the same thing that they were doing during the season like you were talking about. But if I'm the GM, I'm moving on from Vinatieri for sure. We can now move over to the restricted free agents. A lot of these guys are guys that were kind of reserve players that we didn't really hear about a whole lot. The first guy is Brian Body Calhoun, cornerback. Didn't really do a whole lot. I believe he played in 2 games for the Colts. He was just really a special teams guy, more of a reserve guy. And also Trayvon Coley, who was more just of a big body in that interior defensive line. Didn't really get a lot of playing time, though. He only had 6 tackles in the season. And so, for both of these guys, I'm kind of bleh about them. I didn't really see them do anything, didn't really get any playing time. So I'm kind of like whatever for them. And the other guy is Marcus Johnson, who the Colts have already said that they're not going to basically, they're going to let him test free agency. They're not going to bring him back. And so, for all these guys, I probably wouldn't bring them back. I mean, I'm really kind of whatever on him. I'm really kind of lukewarm on all these guys. But do you have a guy that you wanted to see the Colts potentially bring back that you saw some things from?
No, man. I think we just need to let these guys go. Like I said in the last one, you gotta start bringing in some elite guys. You gotta start bringing in some difference makers. I think the glue guys are there. Trayvon Coley. I mean, we didn't really see much of him. I mean, he was brought in, I believe, when Jahad Ward was let go. So, I mean, I would just let all of the restricted free agents go at this point. There's really not even much to say. Like, just let it go. Put that money into someone else or save for the draft and find better depth pieces.
Yeah, that's fair. I totally get that. Okay, so we'll move on now to the exclusive rights free agents. There's only 2 of these guys. There's only 3 restricted free agents. Basically, what these guys are, they're players whose contracts have expired and have 2 or few tenured years in the league. The Colts must make a contract offer by the league-imposed deadline, or the players become unrestricted free agents. And so, first guy I think is a no-brainer to bring back, Reese Fountain, a guy who spent most of his rookie season on the Colts practice squad. Believe he was elevated to the active roster in that Kansas City game. Didn't really do anything. Was kind of a reserve player there. But the interesting thing this last year, Fountain really made this big push, and he was getting a lot of media hype and a lot of preseason hype after just for some reason exploding in that 2019 training camp and preseason. And unfortunately, we know the former 5th-round pick went down with a season-ending ankle injury, a gruesome injury from what it sounded like. And so he's recovering now, which is good. Seems like he's going to, start really working towards, getting back onto the field here very soon. But he's a guy that I would be interested to bring back, especially with the wide receiver competition. Like you said, he's a guy that was vying for a roster spot there. Mm-hmm. He's a young player. And especially not, releasing Deion Kane. I think he's a guy that you just need to bring back. He's more of a project player. He was a 5th-round pick in 2018, but he could potentially be a guy, man, that makes an impact and could make a push for this Colts active roster. And so I think for this offseason, you just got to see what you got with Fountain, and I would definitely bring him back. What would you do with Fountain?
Before I say that, I'm going to make a training camp prediction for 2020. There's going to be 6 wide receivers on the roster. Yeah. There's going to be 6 wide receivers. I'm bringing back Darius Fountain because, like you said, he showed you some big flashes, especially some great catches in the preseason. He was showing out, kind of in the same way Deion Kane was showing out his rookie year in training camp. We were hearing about Darius Fountain this past training camp. And, man, my heart goes out to him, man. That just has to suck the life out of you. That sucked the life out of me when I found out about it. I'm just like, man, Darius Fountain, he's coming up, man. And then out of nowhere, fractured ankle. Just like, oh, dude, this has got to be – you got to be kidding me. But with Darius Fountain, I like his potential. If I'm being honest, I never voiced it, but – I kind of liked Darius Fountain better than Deion Kane. I kind of did. And everybody's making this big hoo-ha about, Deion Kane in Pittsburgh. Look, Deion Kane didn't do anything in Pittsburgh, just like he didn't do anything here. So I don't know why people are trying to get on the Colts for why they let him go. He wasn't producing. And the Darius Fountain, man, he just looks like a potential good number 4 receiver. I mean, and with my prediction, look at this: T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, Zach Pascal. Those 3 guys are literally ultimate locks to be on the roster next year. Then you look at the 1 or 2 draft picks you'll be bringing in, and then maybe a free agent, and then Darius Fountain. That's 7 guys right there. Let them battle it out and figure out the 6.
Yeah.
Because, man, that's where I'm at. I think Darius Fountain makes the roster. And I can't wait to see Darius Fountain again, man. I can't wait. I'm definitely bringing Darius Fountain back.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy who kind of he was a guy that I didn't really know about, but he was a guy that came in this year. Roland Milligan, he played in 11 games. He started a game in 2019. He kind of played some special teams for you. I got injured his foot on December 18th, but he logged some good snaps for the Colts there. Young player, I believe, another safety that, got some more playing time as the season was progressing. I don't know how I feel about bringing back Milligan. I probably would, because I don't think he'll command a lot, and he's a young player, so I'm always interested to see if these guys can develop and if the Colts think they can get something out of him. What are you thinking on Milligan?
Milligan, I'm going to bring back Milligan because he did show some good things, especially remember in the Kansas City game when our secondary was basically depleted. Roland Milligan, along with Kari Willis, George Odom, showed some good things. He didn't allow too much. And when you see how he performs there, you see how he can perform any day. And obviously with that game, there was a lot of motivation because nobody was talking about the Colts. They were going to get destroyed by the Chiefs, so forth and so on. Roland Milligan, for camp body purposes, maybe he makes the roster. Practice squad guy, you bring him back. Guys that work hard, guys that work hard like him, that stay dedicated, you got to reward that. So I bring him back.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our episode today. Just kind of wanted to touch on that. I will not be here this next week when we record. So, Michael, maybe you want to bring on a guest or something, or just kind of go solo next week. I'm going out of town, so I won't be around to record. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps up this episode of the Colts Brawl. Thank you guys so much for your support of us. Be sure to follow us on social media at CPFoger55. And you, Michael, is at Underdog Sports. Is it 4?
Yes.
What's the number?
Yes.
Okay, at Underdog Sports 4. Be sure to follow Michael Terrazas there. And yeah, be sure to just follow us for Colts updates and stuff like that. Different podcasts. We'll let you know when to drop those and everything. And be sure to follow the Colts. Be sure to follow Colts Brawl on Twitter. The Brawl Network. All those people, tremendous individuals. So be sure to follow them there. Yeah, I think that does it here for us here on this episode. Thank you guys so much as always, and I hope you guys have a great weekend and go Colts.